It's now time to bring everyone back together. In this conversation, we'll hear from venture capitalists Redpoint Ventures and Sequoia Capital and receive their thoughts about the trends they're seeing in the application landscape, what investors are looking for today, and their hot takes on what's to come. I'm now handing things off to the moderator of this session, Vice President of Corporate Development for Snowflake Ventures, Stefan Williams. Enjoy.
Thank you, Ryan. Welcome to Build 2022. And Sonya, Tomasz, welcome to, thank you very much for joining us. Before we get started, why don't we do a little bit of an intro. Tomasz, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name's Tomasz Tunguz. I've been a venture capitalist for 14 years at Redpoint, and I've been privileged to work with many companies in the data ecosystem like Hex and Monte Carlo and Transform Data and Preset, amongst others.
Wonderful. Sonya.
Hi, I'm Sonya Huang. I'm a partner at Sequoia, and I similarly focus on enterprise software and data. And I've been fortunate to partner with companies like DBT, Streamlit, Census, Tecton, Hugging Face, and of course, Snowflake.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you again. So I think getting things started, one of the things I think we all at Snowflake are pretty excited about is the evolution of SaaS data applications. And the concept of how people are thinking about the application data and the application code. Tell us about what you guys are seeing. Sonya, why don't you maybe start with that one?
Sure, happy to. So I think it's better to maybe put this current moment in context. And so historically, if you look at the way that SaaS applications were delivered, you didn't have a choice. The application was a package deal with the data store. So I think it's easier with an example. So in the security space, if you need to buy a SIM, and you want Splunk, for example, you get Splunk, the application software, but you get Splunk, the data store as well. And Splunk is the one that owns your data. They're the ones in charge of munging it, ingesting it, changing it, and storing it. And at the end of the day, many of these companies, own your data, they charge you for it, and there's a lot of vendor lock-in. I think for a long time there's been, obviously from the customer's end, in an ideal world, they would love to own their data, right? But it just hasn't been possible to really take ownership of your data in a way that makes sense from a technology perspective. And I think that's why we're in a really unique moment in history right now where, first of all, you have the customer demand. Everyone realizes that data is a strategic imperative. But you also have the technology unlock with what Snowflake is actually doing with the cloud data platform. That now makes it actually possible to decouple the application software from the data and the data delivery, and to have that all work together in a very cohesive way. I think that simply wasn't possible 10 years ago. And so if you go back to the example I shared about Splunk, I think instead of having a world of a monolith between application and data, what you're seeing is a very elegant decoupling. And you're seeing application companies really, really specialize in nailing that workflow, making it perfect for users, and actually handing off management of the infrastructure and the data over to the data platforms. And I think that makes everyone happier. It means the application software providers can focus on user experience. It means the data providers can focus on the best possible environment and technology for dealing with your data. And as a customer, it means you avoid vendor lock-in. You can move your data to whichever workflow suits you best. So to go back to the security example, there's companies like Panther, companies like Cribble, where instead of having your data now in somebody else's walled garden, there's new applications that are building these security workflows on top of your security data lake. And it's not just security. I think we're seeing this broadly in different spaces. We're seeing it in financial data, your ERP, your sales data, your marketing data, your product data. We're seeing it kind of broadly across the application landscape, this trend towards customers want to bring their own data and take ownership over their data, and we're seeing providers respond.
Yeah, I love that. I love the cybersecurity use case, the Panther, the Hunter kind of examples there. Yeah, it's definitely been one of the earlier areas or industries that have taken hold of that model. So super insightful. Thank you. Anything else you'd like to add to that?
I would say the really exciting part is when companies take data sets from different domains, so combining sales and marketing data or combining engineering and product data, you really unlock a lot of what the potential of a data-driven organization is, because now all of a sudden the marketing team and the sales team have the same definition for a metric, or the sales team is now outbounding to customers as a result of product usage information. And historically, what you've needed to do is move the data yourself. You've needed to ask your SaaS provider for your analytics to open up an API that has a certain level of SLA, a certain level of service agreement, to move the data to the right place, and then build everything yourself. And the beauty of this architecture is if you have all the data in one place, then you as the customer can then decide, okay, this is what I need to build, this is how I'm going to build it, all within like a context where you know that the security is stable and adheres to your policies, and even like data residency regimens are respected. And so it's really sort of a foundational movement in architecture. And I think the decoupling idea or the unbundling is at the core of it.
Yeah, and I think your point on bringing together data from different systems, I think the modern company and how it's run is just so interdisciplinary that way. And so a lot of our companies that are growing through this bottoms-up product-led growth motion, the way that the data that they want to see in their sales teams is not just sales data. They want to see product data. Yeah. They want to see marketing data. They want to see market intelligence data, and all that has to come together. And so to what you're saying, it's kind of the ability to bring that all together in a very elegant way, which I think is so unique.
It's so unique.
Yeah, and we see it as well in many conversations that we have, thinking about the different personas throughout the organization, right? The CRO, the CMO, the CFO, the COO, CISO, all of these different personas. And when you talk to kind of large enterprise customers thinking about having a kind of common, let me have a true data-driven strategy, what does that really mean? And I think things like this way that new apps are being built is really a way to unlock a lot of the value that is getting centralized in this kind of core data platform like Snowflake. Yeah,
and there's this zeitgeist of this idea of a data mesh that exists within companies, where instead of having data centrally located, each individual team obviously wants to consume. So if I'm the marketing team, I want data from customer support and I want data from sales. And in exchange, I'm then responsible for actually producing data with a certain SLA. And this kind of architecture allows you to move in that direction.
Yeah, super interesting. We're kind of already starting to go to it a little bit, but what are the things that maybe you guys invest and spend a lot of time in the data ecosystem, but the bigger data ecosystem, at least to what I'm spending my time in? What are the things that most excites you in the data landscape today? Tomasz.
Sure, yeah, I'll start. I've got three things that I think are really exciting. The first is the creation of the semantic layer. And this is an idea where a single person can define a metric once for an entire company. So let's define revenue. And then everybody, the sales team, the marketing team, the finance team, even the customer support team, can use a single definition, which means when we're in a meeting room and talking about shared goals, we're looking at the same numbers, which is a really big deal. The second big theme that I'm really excited about, and you invested in Streamlit, and we're investors in Hex, the idea of creating a data app. So I can start with a notebook, do a bunch of data analysis, and that might mean building a machine learning system or doing some exploratory data analysis, and then taking what I've built and actually creating an application from it that other people who may not be as adept with those kinds of tools might be able to use. And that sort of blends the world of data exploration plus BI. And then the last thing that I'm really excited about is this idea of what we were just talking about, which is like, building applications on top of centralized data warehouses. And we've seen it in security, and we've seen it in data analysis. You can kind of, now we're starting to see it in like sales, financial planning, and many, many other categories. And there are a whole host of advantages to that kind of architecture, which I'm sure we'll touch on.
Yeah, definitely want to touch in on that in a little bit. Sonya, why don't you share your thoughts?
Sure, happy to add some. I thought that was a really good list.
Yeah.
Let's see. I do think that, there's been so much innovation in the fundamental data infrastructure layer. And what I'm excited to see is how can we rethink how that data interfaces with the business user, and the window into the business user. And you mentioned Streamlit and Hex. I think that the way we interface with data today with these very stale BI reports, that cannot be the way that the data-driven enterprise is run in the future. And so, the reason we invested in Streamlit in the first place, and I think the reason Snowflake saw so much potential in it was you can fundamentally rethink the way that data applications get built and how business users get value from data. And so, what will that interface be to eventual users is one thing that I'm really excited about. I would say another one is unstructured data. I think we've come a long way in the world of structured data and SQL and analyzing historical, nice tabular data. I think there's still so much value to be captured in unstructured data, whether it's conversations. I think conversations is a big one, but also images, video, choose your favorite media format. I think there's so much to be done there. And so I'm personally very excited to see what's happening on the unstructured data front, especially with all the innovation around large language models and the like. And then the final thing I'll mention is, I would say a sort of bridging of the two worlds between the SQL speaking world and the Python speaking world. And what I mean by that is, more analytical, more analytics driven, and kind of the more kind of predictive type workloads, and start to marry that together. I think we're in the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We've done a really good job in terms of analytical workloads. And now that companies have all their tables in place, now that they have really great customer records, how can you use that to actually drive business decisions based on what you predict? And so those are a few of the things that I'm excited about.
Super interesting, yeah. The persona, as you think about kind of historically the data analyst and the data scientist and how they used to operate in these silos, and having platforms like Snowflake that actually are bringing those two personas into one to actually rely on the same underlying data without breaking governance or security. There's a lot of really, really interesting things. Obviously with Streamlit acquisition, our investment in Hex is doing extremely well. A bunch of other, obviously other companies that are tying to the machine learning capabilities now natively enabled in Snowflake. And then on your point on the unstructured piece, like we actually obviously just did the acquisition of Applica, right? So that was as we see and try to expand and expand those capabilities around the unstructured use cases. There's obviously a lot more innovation today, but also to come in that space. So super exciting areas.
And think about the data volumes. I mean, all this generative AI where you can type in a bunch of text and it'll produce images or video. I mean, the data volumes there are just going to explode as a result of that.
Cool. Well, maybe keep going on some of these topics here. So, as a VC, you guys are always looking for the next big thing. What's out there in the next 1, 3, 5, 10 years time? What are some of the kind of predictions that you have as it relates to some of this model of an evolution of what is a SaaS application? What are the things that you guys are thinking about? Sonya, do you want to take that one?
Sure, I can start. I would say we're in the middle of a multi-decade transition of enterprise software from dumb to smart. And that means so many different things, right? Like if you think about V1 of enterprise software, if it was very much a system of record, like a system to log customer interactions and things like that. I think we're in V2 right now, which is the software is no longer just a simple system of record. It is starting to be a system of intelligence. For example, if you go back to the sales software use case, Gong is now transcribing your calls, and you're able to, it is a almost smart assistant and helps you do your job better. I think we're still in the early innings of that transition, though, from dumb to smart, and I'm so excited to see what happens as more and more companies really, really take advantage of not just data, but the models, the algorithms that are out there, and harness that in the user experience in what I think can be a pretty profound way. So, for example, some of what I'm seeing in the generative AI space. I'm not sure if you've been following what OpenAI has been doing with GitHub. The fact that 40% of code generated is now generated through a very intelligent retelling of open source code and the semantic understanding of it, I think that is phenomenal. And I think more and more software will start to take that shape of software that's not just a tool, but actually software that begins to feel like a colleague. It is like it starts to get more and more intelligent and feel like a colleague. And so that's what we're very excited about. I think we'll see it across many domains. It'll be cross-domain, but we're impressed by what's happening in the image space and the code space. Gaming will change, and I think just fundamentally, software I don't think will feel like a tool anymore. It'll feel like an intelligent colleague. And I think it all goes back, though, to the underpinning of all of that is data, data, data. Like you don't have intelligence without data. And to me, it all comes full circle. Like I would say the next inning of intelligent software is only possible because enterprises are now starting to make use of their data in smarter ways.
I could not agree with you more. I was preparing a presentation and I wanted to plot something in a data notebook. I was plotting the GitHub stars of an open source project. And I was using GitHub's Copilot, and I literally put in a comment that said, plot the GitHub stars over time.
Yeah.
And it produced it, and it had my theme in it, and I just executed, and boom, the chart was there.
Amazing.
And so it's exactly like having a brilliant coworker next to you. I thought that was a superb analogy. The other thing that I'm really excited about is, I think within the world of software, you've got this new architecture where the data is, let's say it's consolidated inside of Snowflake, and you're building a new sales tool or marketing tool. And the real innovation is now going to start to come on the go-to-market side. And that's a big deal because in 2004, Salesforce was the first company to create that model of an account executive who's an inside sales rep tied to an SDR. We've written books about it. We've studied it. It's now a science. We price early stage companies on metrics that we used to price publicly traded companies on. And now the ethos is product-led growth, right? Which is how do I get a product to be so great that a user can educate themselves why they use it, and then grow. And that's amazing because if you look at the cost of customer acquisition for most software companies, if you plot over the last 6 years, it's been increasing monotonically, so without fail. And the PLG motion is sort of the antidote to that. It's a way of scaling much more efficiently, and at the core of PLG is using a whole bunch of data. The other great benefit of like building a connected app on top of Snowflake is now all of a sudden, what used to be in your cost of goods sold, so the infrastructure costs, a lot of it is actually hosted on Snowflake, which means now you've got superior gross margins, and which means your sales efficiency is better. And so you've got ultimately a much more efficient software business than you could have had, say, 10 years ago, just by virtue of this sort of separation of concerns.
Yeah. And to that last point, though, how do you think the VC and the valuations and how people start to think about companies with this slightly changed P&L than maybe what a traditional SaaS app would be? Is there anything that, from a VC perspective, you guys would be thinking about?
Yeah, it's more like the more efficient of a business you have, the more valuable it is, right? So every once in a while, I'll run correlates on the valuation of a company. Like, what are the top 3 correlates for a publicly traded software company? It used to be revenue growth was the top one. And now with what's been happening macroeconomically, the most important one is efficiency. And a big part of that is sales efficiency. So how many dollars do I have to invest in order to buy a revenue dollar? And when you've got a superior gross margin, your sales efficiency also improves, which is fantastic for a VC. And so that's definitely going to feed into the valuation, make these businesses more attractive investment targets for us.
Yeah. I would say similar perspective, but I think what really matters at the end of the day is, are you providing something that customers want to buy? Mm-hmm. Because that's what shows up in the revenue numbers ultimately, which is, how big can this company get in a gross profit dollar potential is all that really matters for us at the end of the day. I think it's pretty simple in that sense. And so I think the important thing to know is just the change in buyer mindset. Like, the buyer wants this, the buyer is able to purchase faster. We've been waiting a long time for the enterprise app store to happen. I actually think part of what Snowflake is doing in terms of, partner selling and things like that, I think will bring us closer to that vision of an enterprise app store where companies can try SaaS apps and they don't, they're not subject to any lock-in. They can use the best of the best. And so I think distribution will change radically, and that means best product wins and best product that is able to grow efficiently by using the data you have in place.
Yeah. And maybe just double clicking, I mean, that both are super good points, right, on the go-to-market side. From what we're seeing on the connected side of things, right? So we have the managed apps and you have the connected apps. On the connected apps, there are some really interesting go-to-market pieces that come with that speak to some of the sales efficiency things that you were mentioning, Tomasz. And I think we're really excited about seeing some of those things kind of come to fruition when we talk to some of our portfolio companies, in that because the ownership of the data gets to stay with these larger accounts. The procurement, the legal cycles that are associated with typically deploying a SaaS application. I think we've all been there, where you have to go and say, I really want this technology, and you're like, go talk to legal, go talk to procurement, and 6 months later maybe you're close, but not there. And so this ability to kind of allow startups to speak and sell into massive enterprise customers with a reduced friction around selling and their sales cycles is hugely advantageous. And so one of that piece on the go-to-market, but also on just the way that Snowflake has obviously set up with our selling reps, obviously trying to drive consumption and value for our customers. And one of the key ways we're able to do that is by bringing partners in to help unlock new workloads, right? We talked about the personas up front with the different executives across each company, but how do we sell value to them? And it's really a product-led motion within Snowflake. And so our reps are naturally incentivized to bring partners that are driving value into their accounts. And so we've seen a ton of really interesting motion around pipeline generation from that. So it really feels like this. I started to call it SaaS 2.0. It's a different flavor. I don't think the managed app or the regular SaaS it's going away anytime soon. I think we've still got mainframe systems still very prominent in the world of enterprise software, but it's another lever that can really unlock value. And I think as a builder, coming to this session and just thinking about building new applications, new value for companies, like building on top of Snowflake, getting some of those go-to-market benefits in selling motions, in pipeline generation, is extremely exciting for me, at least where I sit and the founders I'm talking to.
Totally. On the pipeline point, one of the things that we're seeing across lots of software companies is a material lengthening of sales cycle. Mm-hmm. And that's problematic for a software company because it introduces a lot more volatility in bookings. And investors don't like volatility. They want nice, predictable bookings and visibility into it. And so if you can build stuff build software on top of Snowflake and have your AEs help, and then you can have the procurement process actually reduced because all the data is actually within Snowflake, that's going to improve the financial appeal of a business.
Yeah. Sonya, anything else you'd like to add?
No, I agree with all of that.
Good. Okay. I think with that, unless there's anything else any closing statements, any predictions? How about that?
Ooh.
I've got a prediction. So,
predictions.
Yeah, I've got a prediction. So 50% of data workloads this year moved to the cloud. So it started at 0, whenever, let's say Snowflake was founded, 2012. And then this year in 22, we got to 50%. So I'll make a prediction that within 2 years, 75% of data workloads move to the cloud.
I love that one. That's a really good one.
Thanks.
Ooh, tricky one. Let's see.
Try to beat that. No, okay, it's not.
It's always a competition. Let's see. I would just have to predict that we're going to see a lot of startup movement this year around unstructured data and generative AI in applications. I think it is such a game changer just in terms of what you can do with technology. And every talented young founder I know is thinking about this right now. And so I think we can expect to see a whole swath of early stage startups in this space in the coming year.
The other crazy part is like how fast that stuff is evolving. I mean, a year ago, we would never have thought of having a co-pilot that's as powerful as it is, or when you look at the image generation is just absolutely so sophisticated.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so the pace of innovation is hard to appreciate, I think, as a human, because it's geometric. Right?
And I think there's this almost Moore's law that applies to not just data, but models. And I mean, if models are human intelligence, then human intelligence advancing exponentially is pretty hard to wrap your brain around.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no, we've definitely got some interesting times ahead. Well, look, thank you so much for joining us today here at Build. We really appreciate both of you being here. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Love the predictions. You're hearing it here first. What an incredible day one builders. And the fun doesn't stop here. We're just getting started. Tomorrow we'll have even more great sessions, plus the ever popular hands-on labs. For those of you who are joining Build Local events, enjoy the time sharing best practices with your peers. Thank you so much for joining us today for Build Day One. We'll see you here tomorrow. We are still buzzing from this past June at Snowflake Startup Challenge Grand Finale live from Las Vegas. My name is Ryan Green, anchor for Data Cloud Now and host of Snowflake's Startup Challenge. In the third year, they are yet again raising the stakes, which brings us to the historic intersection of innovation and entrepreneurship, the corner of Wall and Broad. George Washington was sworn in as our first president on this very corner back in 1789. And 3 years later, the New York Stock Exchange was founded. Our country and our capital markets quite literally grew up as next door neighbors. If these walls could talk, the stories from founders, entrepreneurs, titans of industry would pour out of them, with the common theme of how disruptors took ideas and through access to capital allowed them to change the world. That is what we are looking for in this year's Snowflake Startup Challenge. Which founder leads the team, has the product vision, and go-to-market strategy to use the capital to develop the next leading application on Snowflake. It's now time to take the challenge to the next level. This year, Snowflake is partnering with the NYSE, making the connection to an opportunity of a lifetime. Will this year's winner be destined for a spot on the Bell podium to celebrate their IPO? Only time will tell.